Welcome to the ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. A reminder before we start, we are recording our presentations and the following discussions, and we are posting these for our wider audience. The videos will be available on our YouTube channel, ICSS Marxist, and our website, icssmarx.org, in the next couple of days. We have also started sharing our videos on Rumble for a backup, and I'll post the Rumble link later in our chat today as well as. Please visit our website, icssmarx.org, to view the past programs, sign up to receive weekly notification or emails about upcoming programs and schedules, contact us, or donate to us for the funds we truly need to run this educational forum. I would also like to thank those who have and still continue to support us through their valuable donations. My name is Mehmet Bayram, and I will be hosting this session on Sunday, May 4th, 2025. For over 15 years, ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum programs have been a platform for diverse presentations on various topics. This meeting is a comradely forum for political discourse and debate. The opinions expressed here are those of the participants, and they do not necessarily represent those of ICSS. However, we are united in our respect for the work of Karl Marx, and we believe that his work remains relevant today. Our understanding is taken from Karl Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. We are at the 50th anniversary of the Vietnamese people freeing their country from an illegal invasion. It was one of the worst defeats US imperialism experienced. The victory of the Vietnamese showed the world that even when facing a much more powerful enemy, people all over the world could defeat imperialism, no matter how much the odds were against them. So please today join us for a half-century reflection on the American war in Vietnam from two of our heroic peace activists who were instrumental in fighting for peace then and continue today as national and international leaders. We invite others attending the Marxist Forum who are also active against the Vietnam War to share in the Q&A session. An overarching theme is how the US war on Vietnam changed us and our nation. On September 1, 1987, some of the most dedicated peace activists in the nation, including our two guests, were protesting outside the Concord Naval Weapons Station, trying to block a Navy munitions train loaded with weapons bound for Nicaragua and El Salvador. Instead of stopping the train and arresting the protesters, authorities ordered the train to speed up. While some barely made it off the tracks, Brian Willson was run over. He suffered horrific injuries but survived. He lost both legs and now walks via prostheses. Brian Willson once commanded an Air Force combat security unit in Vietnam. He has since helped create a host of veterans organizations and has been a critic of the US criminal justice system and its foreign policies. Brian received the Peace Abbey Courage of Conscience Award at the Kennedy Library and Museum in 1992, and in addition to his JD, holds two honorary degrees. Author of On Third World Legs and Blood on the Tracks, he is the subject of a 2016 documentary, Paying the Price for Peace. Brian will be speaking from Nicaragua, where he currently lives and where he is rightly considered a hero. Gerry Condon, a Great Barrett medic, deserted the US Army in 1969 after refusing orders to deploy to the war in Vietnam. He founded sanctuary in Sweden and Canada for 6 years before returning to the US as a part of campaign for amnesty for all war resistors. He is a former president and current national board member of Veterans for Peace, president of the Golden Rule Committee, and a member of the crew that sailed the Golden Rule to Cuba. Gerry was violently arrested outside the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. on May 8, 2019, after he attempted to throw a cucumber into the embassy to deliver food to activists inside. Gerry recently returned from leading a Veterans for Peace delegation to Nicaragua. So welcome, Brian and Gerry. I'll leave the platform to you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, that was also known as a cucumber of mass destruction. Um, but anyway, thank you so much, Marxist Forum, and all you good organizers for inviting us to join you on this special occasion. This is, of course, this week is the 50th anniversary on April 30th of the end of the Vietnam War, or the end of the American War in Vietnam, the Vietnamese victory. There's a lot of webinars going on, even today, even right now, other places, yesterday and today, and on the 30th itself. A lot of people trying to make sense of that war and the resistance to it, and learn the lessons for today. All kinds of different lessons being learned. I'm happy to know that there's on April 30th, there was a huge parade in Hanoi, and a delegation of Veterans for Peace that were given an honored place on the reviewing stand there. So I'm glad our good friend Paul Cox from San Francisco, Veterans for Peace, led that delegation. We've been sending Veterans for Peace delegations to Nicaragua for the last 10 years, at least, I think, and supporting a lot of important projects there.
You mean in Vietnam?
And what did I say?
Nicaragua.
Ah, yeah. Well, Vietnam to Nicaragua, that's part of the theme here today. So we're talking about how we were all changed. Many of us were active against the Vietnam War, and we were all changed in various ways. And in particular, we're going to talk about how Vietnam veterans were changed. It was the vision and leadership of Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party of Vietnam that, combined with the courage and determination of thousands of Vietnamese men and women in the North Vietnamese Army and the National Liberation Front in the South, that were primarily responsible for defeating U.S. imperialism and forcing the withdrawal of U.S. military forces from Vietnam. The peace movement in the U.S. and worldwide also played an important role in ending the war. In the U.S., mass resistance to military conscription helped fuel an anti-war movement that was largely made up of the young. Resistance within the military, even among combat troops in Vietnam, may have sounded the final death knell for the U.S. war. In U.S. bases around the world, scores of GI newspapers had sprung up in opposition to the war, and also with class-conscious mocking of the officer class. After all, it was typically working-class soldiers who bore the brunt of the war, while middle and upper-class men filled the officers' ranks that commanded poor and working-class GIs to take that hill. In Vietnam, this even led to the assassination of officers by GIs who were tired of watching their buddies die. This shocking phenomenon was known as fragging, for the fragmentation grenades that were sometimes rolled into officers' tents. Many soldiers and even entire units refused to follow orders to move forward. That, along with addiction to heroin, conveniently supplied by the CIA, made for an army that could no longer fight against a well-organized adversary determined to win its own freedom and independence. Veterans coming home from the war in Vietnam were quick to join anti-war demonstrations and even to lead them. Thousands joined Vietnam Veterans Against the War. The myth of returning veterans being spat upon by hippie peace activists was pro-war propaganda intended to divide the veterans from the peace movement. This unfortunate myth survives, but it did not work. Thousands of veterans actively organized against the war, and many Vietnam veterans are anti-war activists to this very day, as evidenced by Veterans for Peace chapters in over 100 U.S. cities. In contrast, there was the Veterans of Foreign Wars. At their 1983 National Convention in New Orleans, they invited President Ronald Reagan to be their keynote speaker, and they announced they were going to send $1 million to the Contras, the CIA-organized counter-revolutionary army in Nicaragua. Many Vietnam veterans were outraged. "The VFW does not speak for us," they said. "We don't want another Vietnam War in Central America." and thus began a series of veterans delegations to Nicaragua, a veterans peace walk through the war zones in Nicaragua, the Veterans Fast for Life, the Veterans Peace Action Teams that were rebuilding schools and clinics that had been destroyed by the Contras, and the Veterans Peace Convoy to Nicaragua, all taking place between 1983 and 1988. The powerful transformation of sometimes gung-ho GIs to committed peace activists is personified by two of the most prominent Vietnam veterans, both of whom were coincidentally born on the 4th of July. One of them, Ron Kovic, who was paralyzed from the chest down due to wounds he suffered in Vietnam, and who was thrown out of his wheelchair by Los Angeles police when leading an anti-war demonstration, wrote a great book about his experience, Born on the 4th of July, which was made into a great movie by Oliver Stone. The other prominent Vietnam veteran activist, Brian Willson, lost both legs in September 1987 when he was run over by a munitions train at Concord Naval Weapons Depot, which was sending arms to U.S.-backed right-wing forces and death squads in El Salvador and Nicaragua. Brian has written a profound accounting of his experiences in his book, Blood on the Tracks. Brian is an inspiring leader who was the impetus for the Veterans Peace Walk, the Veterans Fast for Life, the Veterans Peace Action Teams, and so much more. Brian now lives in Nicaragua, where he is widely acclaimed as a national hero, and he has been awarded Nicaraguan citizenship. We are fortunate to have Brian Willson with us today. Welcome, Brian. It's nice to have you with us via Zoom all the way from your home in Managua, Nicaragua. Would you like to start, Brian, by telling us a little bit about who you were before you went to Vietnam and how you were changed by your experiences in the war?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in upstate New York in the 50s and 60s. Kind of a normal, typical Cold War atmosphere. Lower working class, played sports normally, and I grew up in a little town that I really loved. It was we had everything we needed there in terms of food, and we even had a blacksmith. But my family was very right wing, very religious, and of course, I became a regular churchgoer because of that. But I had an older brother, my only sibling, who had gone to a teacher's college in upstate New York, where he had two Marxist professors that really jolted his political consciousness about class struggle. So he helped me, his little brother, navigate through breaking through the religious brainwashing, and then I went on to college, and I went to law school, and I was in law school. My fourth semester is when I was drafted. I had tried to enlist in 1964, and I was turned down because of high arches in my feet. It's called pes cavus. But in 1966, when Johnson increased his draft call, they had to go to the school deferments, and I was one who was drafted. And then before I had to report, I enlisted in the Air Force. I didn't want to go in the Army or the Marines. I wasn't particularly interested in being in the military, but I was just navigating without any political consciousness. I was navigating my life as easy as it could be. I was trying to avoid combat and so forth. So I did 4 years in the Air Force. Interestingly, the Air Force created what they called they called it the Air Force, an Air Force Security Police Unit, but it was modeled after Fort Benning Ranger School. And I don't know why I got selected for that, but I did. and we were trained at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, before we went to Vietnam. And it was in the bayonet training at Fort Campbell. I didn't still have any real politics, but I refused to do the bayonet training just because it seemed so repulsive to me. It really wasn't a political act. It was just a personal act of repulsion in my mind.
A lot of GIs balked at that bayonet training. It was too up close and personal, I guess.
Yep.
Kill, kill, kill.
And you shouted it 100 times.
Right.
Kill 100 times. So I got in trouble for that. Had to see the squadron commander, then I had to see the wing commander, then I had to see a psychiatrist. It was all pretty ridiculous, but I wound up going with my unit on March 8th, 1969. And in my first 6 weeks, I started really having a pretty turbulent emotional and intellectual challenge as to how I was going to deal with all the changes that were going on in my mind and in my heart. And I was given a special assignment just for 1 week. It wasn't even my job, but I agreed to do it, which was assessing the success or not of bombing missions. And bombing missions were daytime, and I had a Vietnamese officer that attended with me, and we would do 5 villages in April of 1969. And that's where my life completely changed. Every village, every target, I didn't even think about the target being a village, but of course in Vietnam, everybody was a target, and they were all, we considered a dead Vietnamese, a good Vietnamese. And so the very first village we went into, I remember it was April 14th, 1969. And I was shocked what I viewed. It was bedlam. Virtually everybody had been killed. The napalm bombing. There was a water buffalo over as we got close to the village. There was a water buffalo lying on its side with a big gash in its belly and a third of its skull gone. I threw up when I saw that, and then immediately I saw all these bodies on the ground, and one woman in particular who was holding her children when the bombs came. Her eyelids had been burned off, and I was looking at her eyes, and I was struck by the fact that I was looking at a woman who, to me, at some psychic level, was my sister or my mother. And I've never gotten over that. In fact, I given her name, Miley, because I think of her all the time. And the Vietnamese officer I was with laughed as I was crying and throwing up. So at that point, I guess you'd say it might have been like an LSD trip. I haven't had an LSD trip. I'm one of the few of my generation that haven't. But when I discussed this with my therapist later on, when I got out of the military, they said, well, that was like an LSD trip when you saw that woman's eyes, and immediately realized that everybody's connected in the earth. Everybody's connected. As Martin Luther King used to say, an injury anywhere, an injury anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so from that point on, I was the first lieutenant, and I carried out all my duties. I was the night security commander of an air base. And I spoke out against the war every day after that. That was my only resistance. I was just being obnoxious with the the NCOs and the officers, but I every day spoke out about the unconscionable nature of the war, the criminality of the war, and I guess that's why they sent me home early. They sent me home after 5 months, and I was glad. I was happy to leave. And I did one more year in the military in Louisiana, and then I was out. And went back to law school, finished, passed the bar exam in DC, and first time I went into a courtroom after that, I looked at the flag up by the judge, and I couldn't look at the flag. I just couldn't look at it. It had been a symbol to me as a child during the McCarthy era, as a signal of freedom and justice. And then when I saw it, when I walked in the courtroom in 1972, it was like a swastika to me. I could not look at that flag without having really visceral reaction in my body. And I walked out and I never went back. I never practiced law.
So Brian, at that point, had you made contact with other anti-war veterans?
Well, I had joined Vietnam Veterans Against the War in 1970, but I wasn't active with Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I was at Dewey Canyon 3, which was on a mall of DC, or in the week of April 1971, if my memory is correct. And I remember feeling like I believed that what all these grunts were saying, but I hadn't really been a grunt.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to get into a conversation and tell anybody that I'd been an officer. I remember that. So I just kind of was there to soak in the flavor of resistance and opposition to the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from one activity after another, one political action after another throughout the 70s and 80s. Mostly I was dealing with prison issues in the United States. When I was in law school, I lived for almost a year in the DC jail. And this was before Vietnam. And I had gone to all the Black Muslim meetings every week in the jail, and interviewed in that year probably almost 2,000 prisoners. So that was the beginning of my political consciousness. And when I left the law in 1972 or 3, I had no idea what I was going to do. My wife at the time was a lawyer. So I didn't have to worry about making money right away. But one thing led to the next, and I always had an interesting job that popped in front of me. And from 1972 to 1980, it was mostly about prison issues in the United States. Nixon had started a massive prison building project in 1974. Mm-hmm. And then in 1980, I started reading, remember the magazine, the newspaper, The Guardian, but the U.S. version of The Guardian.
Right.
Very radical. And
independent Marxist newspaper.
Yeah. And so I was keeping up with Central America issues with that paper. And then in 1986, I left my job as director of the Veterans Outreach Center in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and went to Nicaragua to study Spanish. I wanted to be directly involved in the war zone areas, and so I was in Esteli for 9 weeks studying Spanish. Still can't speak Spanish, but it's kind of an embarrassment. And a big disadvantage being in Nicaragua, not being able to go out in the street and have conversations with the people. And sometimes I can say something, but I never know what they say back. At any rate, yeah, my life was totally changed by being in Vietnam and even at Fort Campbell before I went to Vietnam. And, just the journey just continued. It continued and still continued.
Right. Well, what was it so it was reading The Guardian that where you first heard about what was going on in Nicaragua?
Yeah.
And that was part of the reason you decided to study Spanish there?
Yes. I wanted to study in a war zone.
Well, you led a bunch of Nicaragua-related projects and efforts, and I'm thinking right now, Brian, of the very dramatic Veterans Peace Walk through the war zones of Nicaragua. You want to share a little bit about that?
We call them the Veterans Peace Action Teams. We started the first one on February 19th, 19, my memory's kind of bad these days, 1987. We had selected 11 people to be on the first Veterans Peace Action Team. We rehearsed for a week at a farm in California, role playing, being confronted by the Contras. What would we do? We would not have any weapons. And there were several people that left the group after they realized that we couldn't have weapons if we were confronted. And that was okay. We were completely open about the philosophy of the group. And that on March 23rd to March 29th, we walked 75 miles from Jinotega to Wiwili near the Honduran border. And in that week, we encountered lots of Contra activities just off the road. And we did not know what was going to happen to us. The Contras were on their CIA paid radio station out of El Salvador. And they said they were going to kill the people who were on that march. And we got on a Nicaraguan radio station and said, we're not worried because we know that you promised Congress you would uphold human rights. And of course, that was kind of guerrilla conversation. We did not know what they were going to do. But we made it to Wiwili on March 29th. And it was quite an experience. We found some landmines on the road. We had been taught how to look for a freshly planted landmine. And we found a couple of those, and we made some big rocks around it so people wouldn't go over that mine. When we got to Wiwili, there's no electricity because all the electric wires were down by the Contras. But when we got to Wiwili, the Sandinistas helicoptered in ice cold beer and pop or sodas. And I remember thinking, I was felt so lucky having some cold water and cold drinks after that 75-mile walk. And that had a lot of press coverage in Nicaragua. Nothing in the U.S. reported.
And then the Veterans Peace Action Teams kind of evolved into a number of teams going on down over several years. I was on a couple of those where we were actually rebuilding schools and clinics that had been destroyed by the Contras. And I remember how powerful that was for the Vietnam combat veterans in particular, to go into a war zone with the sounds of war, the smells of war, and very similar in some ways to their experience in Vietnam, but they were totally committed to nonviolence, and they were doing something positive and productive, and it turned out to be a profound healing experience.
Definitely, it was for our first team too.
Yeah.
We weren't doing the rebuilding. The successive teams were doing the rebuilding, but we had to convince President Ortega to let us walk through the war zone undefended. I'm not sure what they might have been doing without us knowing it, but when we were walking on that road, we never saw any Sandinista soldiers. We did see some conchas running off to the side. There were a couple mortar explosions just ahead of us, but we never saw any Sandinista soldiers.
Right. Well, it
Who
wasn't too
knows?
long after that, Brian, where you and 3 other veterans began a Veterans Fast for Life on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Could you tell us about that?
Well, that fast actually was in '86, a year before the walk.
Okay.
There were 4 of us who decided that we were tired of electoral politics and decided to fast on water only, open-ended. We were sure that we would probably die. We all were fans of Bobby Sands' hunger strike in Ireland. We were all aware of that. And we were even aware of Norman Morrison's immolation. I was surprised the other guys had known that. It wasn't that well known in the United States. That was Norman Morrison's immolation on November 2nd, 1965. And so we discussed immolation or fasting, and we didn't have the courage to do the immolation. But we started the fast on September 1st, and it wasn't till about the 14th or 15th of September that people started taking us seriously as they noticed we were losing weight. And we were there until October 17 when we stopped the fast because one of the 4 of us, we were told by the doctor, was 2 or 3 days away from death. And although we had planned to all die, and we're figuring that we wouldn't see any response from the public enough to warrant us stopping, but we didn't want to see our partner die, George Mizo, and so we stopped after 47 days, and that was, we finally got a lot of publicity about that after about 30 days.
All right.
And
Well, that was a quartet. That was a quartet of 4 very, very strong, committed veterans. Yourself, Brian, along with George Mizo, Charlie Litke, and Duncan Murphy.
Right.
And you're the only one who's still alive.
Right. Not for much longer, probably, but
so presente.
So good.
You did get the attention of Congress people. I've seen some pictures of the Congress people out to visit with you on the steps there.
Yeah. No, we after 30 days or so, we started getting a lot of attention from the public and from Congress, including John Kerry.
Yeah, well, one more Veterans Initiative I wanted to mention before we move on is, of course, the Veterans Peace Convoy to Nicaragua.
Right.
So this was, part of a whole series of delegations. Well, first of all, in 1987, I guess it was, we went up again into the war zones with a delegation of about 19 veterans. And that was at a time when there was supposed to be a ceasefire agreed upon by the United States and the Contras and the Sandinistas. But the war was raging all around us. And while we were in Ocotal, they were bringing in dead and wounded soldiers. Yeah. Duncan Murphy was there. And people were really, the Vietnam veterans were so angry after meeting the wounded soldiers. And they said, we have to do something, more dramatic. So this whole idea came up of a Veterans Peace Convoy to Nicaragua, and it started to gain quite a bit of momentum. And so the next year, here we were in 87, 88. I guess it was 88 that the convoy actually happened.
Right.
Veterans from all over the country. There was a West Coast route and an East Coast route. 39 trucks, mostly small Toyota trucks, but some larger vehicles, came together at the border at Laredo, Texas, with aid. The slogan was "Feed the children, not the war." and there was all kinds of aid on those trucks, and the trucks themselves were going to be donated as part of the aid so that they could be used to distribute aid. And it was the first time, I guess, in the U.S. history when when the government stopped a humanitarian aid caravan from leaving the U.S. So Ronald Reagan, who's president, and Elliott Abrams was the Undersecretary of State for Latin America, and they ordered that the caravan be stopped, the convoy be stopped. So there was a big showdown in Laredo, Texas. Eventually, we got all the trucks onto the bridge. We forced them to close the bridge down. The veterans stayed in their vehicles, locked the doors, rolled up the windows, and then were attacked by SWAT teams who broke the windows, sprayed mace into people's eyes, pulled them out of the trucks, beat them up, charged them with assaulting the police, of course. At that point, we decided to turn the caravan around. We drove it all the way back up to Washington, D.C., drove round and around the White House for a while, met with Congress. Didn't get much satisfaction there, by the way. Then we drove all the way back down to Laredo, Texas, and we actually took the government to court and to get an injunction. And while we were in court, we announced that by hook and by crook, we had managed to get all the trucks on the other side of the border. So this was like a big showdown, Vietnam veterans primarily taking the lead on this. And there was more or less a news blackout in the US. There was a few little stories about it. But in Latin America, this was a huge deal. People were so amazed that Vietnam veterans would take such a stand and at risk to themselves. So when we drove those vehicles through Mexico, there were events all along the way, and we were celebrated as we went. And even when we were on like small dirt roads driving through some rural areas of Honduras and Guatemala, there would be peasants out on the road applauding the caravan as we went by. It was so emotional. And when we arrived in Nicaragua finally, there were 10,000 people at the border to meet us, and
That's
people
wonderful.
cheering all the way to Managua. So that was a momentous thing that people in Nicaragua remember well. And so it's just a kind of capped off this whole long-term commitment of veterans to supporting the revolution in Nicaragua. We've continued to go down over the years, a number of veterans delegations. We had a VFP delegation down there just a few weeks ago. Once again, learning about the amazing progress that's been made in Nicaragua with free health care, free education, quality education, and health care, free of charge in the third poorest country in the hemisphere.
Also a very safe country.
Yeah, you want to say more about how things are in Nicaragua today, Brian?
Well, the revolution is still kind of dynamically progressing, but what they've already accomplished is amazing. And in education and healthcare, they're constantly building new hospitals. Healthcare is free. Education is free, including university education. And now everybody has good water, good sanitation systems. The U.S. is still hoping to create some sabotage. I mean, I was just reading something the other day that Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, was talking about having to plan some actions in Nicaragua and Venezuela to disturb the population. U.S. is very good at destruction, as you know.
Well, you were in Nicaragua in 2018 with the U.S.-backed attempted coup, and you experienced some of that terror yourself, didn't you?
I did. It started on April 18th, 2018.
Right.
And it lasted for about 4 to 5 months. And there were 1,400 roadblocks that the opposition had created, all paid for, of course, by the United States. They even had prostitutes at the roadblocks satisfying the men, and they were armed. And when a group that I'm in, the Historical Combatants of Nicaragua, I'm a member of them, President Ortega asked us to help free up all those blockades, barricades in July. And so with the police and with historical combatants, they cleared out all the barricades. I think there were almost 1,400 of them. And there were some of our historical combatants were killed in that process of clearing out the blockades, the tranques, they call them. I think 12 of us lost our lives as we confiscated the barricades because they weren't going to give up. And we tried to arrest them, and they refused to arrest. And so a number of them were killed. And I think in the whole operation, 23 Nicaraguan policemen were killed. It was very scary. A lot of people.
There's over 200 people were killed, I think, overall, right?
Yeah. And some burned to death. Some were shot in the head.
The U.S. media said they were all being killed by Nicaraguan police.
They still say that.
Yeah.
When they talk about 2018, they said the repressive Sandinistas, they killed 200 people, including their own students. It's all, of course, bullshit. But
I think the majority of those killed actually were Sandinistas.
That's right. Well, it's about even. I think it's about even when all the blockades were cleared up. I think more like 300 were killed altogether. And of course, even the human rights organization blamed the Sandinistas for the killings. Human Rights Watch. What's another one? Amnesty International. So Nicaragua has never gotten any good press from the U.S. and it's not a mystery. The CIA controls the narrative. They actually do control the narrative. And
why do you think so many people on the left even have kind of fallen for that regime change propaganda especially when it comes to Nicaragua?
Well, a lot of the people that were on the left in the 80s that were part of the Sandinistas, they tended to have more education. So they spoke English. So they had good relations with Congress in the 80s, some of the Sandinista leaders. And so the Congress was used to speaking to these Nicaraguans who spoke English. When the Sandinistas were defeated in the 1990 elections that were paid for by the U.S., in which the Sandinistas were defeated, a lot of those people that had been with the Sandinistas up to that time left because they were no longer at a job with the government, and they were being asked by educational institutions in the United States were giving them free education to get master's degrees, and some of them went to Harvard even. A lot easier than being an opposition party. So that opposition party was known as MRS. They have no following or no popularity in Nicaragua, but some of the people in MRS live in the United States, and they still are good spokespeople for the United States propaganda against Nicaragua. It's kind of a sad case.
Yeah. So I wanted to remind people that, after 10 years of counter-war and sanctions during the 80s, the Sandinistas agreed to have an election, and the opposition candidate was supported by the United States, of course, and to some extent, to a large extent, the Nicaraguan people were voting with a gun at their head.
That's true.
But they did, the opposition candidate, Violeta Chamorro, which the U.S. encouraged everybody to unite around, did in fact win the majority of the votes in this election. And the Sandinistas, to their credit, Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas accepted the defeat, and they said, okay, we're going to go into opposition. And that was the first peaceful transfer of power, I think, in the history of Nicaragua.
I think so.
And they stayed in opposition for the next 16, 17 years while a series of neoliberal governments basically ran the country into the ground.
And
Total
all
corruption.
funded by the U.S., of course.
Reversed all the gains that had been made in literacy and in poverty reduction, et cetera, et cetera.
Healthcare.
Yeah. So, but Daniel Ortega managed to get reelected, and the election was in 2006. He took power in 2007. So people mark the last 18 years, I guess now, since 2007. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
That's the period of just incredible progress that's been made. It's really palpable and visible.
Dozens of new hospitals.
What's that?
Dozens of new hospitals, and also
Yeah.
smaller neighborhood clinics.
Right.
It was pretty easy to get to get healthcare no matter where you were in the country.
Yeah. And several of us here on this call, I see some familiar faces, were in Nicaragua for the 2021 election. And that was the best organized, most transparent and exemplary election you could imagine. And Daniel Ortega won over 70% of the vote. I bet 65% of the people, of eligible voters, participated. Right. And the current polling shows that the government still has over 70% popularity.
Good reason.
Yeah. And the one other thing that I wanted to mention before we move on maybe to some discussion, our recent delegation in Nicaragua was so impressed by the deep and broad commitment to gender equality. I mean, that they have by law, every party who submits candidates has to submit at least an equal number of women candidates as men. There are actually more cabinet positions filled by women than by men. And if you have a male mayor, you have to have a
female vice mayor.
Female vice mayor. You have a lot of co-directors now of the various government agencies be one man and one woman. And it's not token. It's really deep and embraced. Now we even have co-president, because Rosario Murillo, who's Daniel Ortega's wife and a longtime Sandinista leader, has been vice president. Now she's the co-president. And, you know, some people far away kind of, you know, raise their eyebrows. Well, how could you have a man and a wife to be president and vice president, now co-president? But in Nicaragua, it's very well accepted. And the leadership of both those people is considered critically important and is widely celebrated. Then international agencies have rated Nicaragua #1 in gender equality in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere, and #6 in the world. So that is a very significant, remarkable development.
One thing I wanted to add about our walk to Wiwili, which was in March of 2000. Boy, my brain is bad these days with dates. It was that 1987. We came upon an ambush of a Sandinista kitchen truck. The truck was in flames when we got there. It happened just before we got there on the road. And there were still, I think there were 6 killed and 9 injured. and 3 of the 9 injured still hadn't gotten to the hospital because they were sending another ambulance back. But we took them in our Jeep to Apenas Military Hospital, 3 of the veterans. And it turns out that one of those 3 discovered that I was back in Nicaragua. I came here in 2017. His name is Roger Gonzalez, and he was the lieutenant of the kitchen crew that got ambushed. And he's told me that when we dropped him off at Apenas Military Hospital, the doctors told him that he didn't have much longer to live because he had so many shrapnel wounds that were affecting his kidneys and his liver. And he sends me messages pretty regularly telling me how much he appreciates the fact that I saved his life. But it was just a matter of taking him to a hospital, dropping him off, and then 35 years later, we met in Nicaragua and had a wonderful reunion after 34 whatever years, from 1988 to 2022, I think we met here. So that was I have pictures in my book of the burning truck, in my Blood on the Tracks book.
Blood on the Tracks, yes. Well, Brian, we covered a lot of ground there. I think we're gonna maybe get ready to take a break soon, but when we come back, can have a very interesting discussion, including inevitably what are some of the lessons that we've learned from our resistance to the Vietnam War, and what are the special role that veterans and GI resistance can play today. So lots of, and you'll probably have some more questions about Nicaragua as well, but I think this might be a good breaking point, Mehmet.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you so much for both of you for a very interesting presentation. I'm sure we're going to go more into these and both Vietnam and Nicaragua events. But before we go on to the next part of the QA session, I'd like to remind everybody that we have another great session coming up next Sunday, May 11th. It's titled Imminent U.S. War on Iran by Bahman Azad. This will be a session you don't want to miss. Bahman Azad is the author of Heroic Struggle, Bitter Defeat, Factors Contributing to the Dismantling of the Socialist State in the USSR. Bahman is currently the president of the U.S. Peace Council, a member of the Secretariat of the World Peace Council, and a representative of the World Peace Council at the United Nations. So he's also a member of the Administrative Committee of the United National Anti-War Coalition. Bahman Azad is affiliated with the anti-imperialist Iranian 10 Mayor Group. He was co-chair of Venezuelan Embassy Protectors Defense Committee and is currently serving as the coordinator of the Coalition Against U.S. Foreign Military Bases and the coordinator of the Hands Off Syria Coalition. So you really want to be here next week as well. So for our QA, I'd like to remind once again to please respect the time of the speakers and other participants by limiting yourself to 2 minutes for either the questions or the comments, and please stick to one question at a time to allow the speakers to respond. Also, please indicate which speaker your question is addressing. So with that, we are going to go to the questions, and I have, first of all, Tupper Linke. Please unmute yourself if you can, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Tupper Linke here. I just want to ask Brian Willson a question, and I want to thank Gerry, Condon, and Brian for this fine talk they've given with all this history and current information about Nicaragua and the history of Vietnam. Brian, I met you at Frank Dorrell's house here in Los Angeles some years ago, and you gave a great talk there, and I read your books, Blood on the Tracks and Don't Thank Me for My Service. And I also saw you talking at a downtown meeting. I forgot what it was down there, but my question is that there were some other questions that were up, and you're talking about the environment and military militarism. And I just wonder, and you said in answer to somebody, we need to have a deeper conversation. And that phrase stuck in my mind. And today, you know, as my wife and I are working towards ending imperialism and militarism and the genocide in Gaza, can you say a couple of things about what the deeper conversation is that we should be having with ourselves and our friends and our relatives and with the people we're communicating with and our representative or senators? What is the deeper conversation?
Well, I can give a stab at it. I think the current political economy of the United States is irredeemable and unreformable. I don't think we can get too far in terms of progress utilizing the party system or the history of elections in the United States. I think that the culture has never ever dealt with the shame of how it originated, the shame of two genocides, Holocaust, if you will, against the Native Americans and against Africans. Our ancestors committed those actions with complete impunity. Shame is a very important evolutionary factor in human development, because you have to look at yourself and say, gee, maybe I have it wrong. It's different than guilt. You have to, like, for example, myself in Vietnam, I realized I was living with a fake identity. A white male was superior. Well, I think until we address the Holocaust that originated in the Western culture in the United States, we haven't learned the deep lessons of you can't keep doing it this way. You can't keep doing it this way. And I know that shame is a very difficult thing to deal with. I've had to deal with it myself because of my role in Vietnam. But I think the United States has had impunity since 1607. Everything is done because we white Europeans are superior to, we think, to indigenous Africans, indigenous Americans. And when you have to deal with the fact that you have had a fallacious idea about how reality is, you mature, you develop a deeper moral compass. You really do understand that other people are as valuable as you are, and that justice has to be truly blind, which is not in our society. We are a racist, classist, sexist society. And if we were really going to be revolutionary, we would talk about getting rid of wage slavery and beginning a socialist revolution. And at least sowing the seed for it. The Democrats don't do it. And yet I think that's what is available to us right now at this critical time where the society is collapsing. They have a 14-year-old president. He's the mentality of a teenager, and it's going to collapse. Economically, it's going to collapse. So it's an opportune time for people to start questioning, do we really want to just have another party, even to revive the Democratic Party? And I think the deeper question is, you have to deal with the shame of our origins. And that by doing that, we will be revolutionized.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. That's just terrific. I'm going to pass on to the next questioner, but I forgot to mention, I also liked your response to Ken Burns' movie about Vietnam. That was a very well-written response, and I've used that with my right-wing relatives. And thank you for that. And I'll turn the floor over to the next questioner. Thank you again for your answer there, Brian. So good to see you today.
Thank you
Good
so
to
much.
see you.
So we are now going to go to Sharon. Sharon, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation, both of you. It was very gratifying to hear you and brought back enormous amounts of memories. I do have a question, but I want to make a couple comments first. I think that one of the most important lessons is the massive nature of the anti-war movement, how huge it was, and the role it played in ending the war. So I recommend the movie The Movement and the Madman, which really shows the breadth of the anti-war movement. It also shows an organization that I helped start, which was called Federal Employees for Peace.
What is it?
Federal Employees for Peace. Oh, the movie is The Movement and the Madman. It's a PBS movie. It's about Richard Nixon, the madman. It's not perfect, but it does show the breadth of the anti-war movement. Federal Employees for Peace was started as Federal Employees Against the War. We passed around a secret petition. We all thought we were going to be fired, but the Johnson administration decided not to make martyrs of us. And we had hundreds of signatures, which the Washington Post refused to print. But the role that movie also shows the role that the anti-war movement played in ending the war. Now, of course, it was a victory for the Vietnamese people, but we did help stop the war. And
Absolutely.
some people actually died in the anti-war movement. Today is the 55th anniversary of Kent State.
Right.
And also a week later, two students died at Jackson State, Mississippi. We should not forget those martyrs.
Exactly.
And we should also honor the people who resisted the draft. They are derogatorily called draft dodgers, but they are not. They are draft resistors, including a comrade who died recently, Gerry Hicks, who spent 3 years in federal prison for burning his draft card. But they had to stop putting people in prison for burning their draft cards because it would have filled up the prisons.
Yeah.
3 minutes.
The Vietnamese actually thanked us for building the anti-war movement. My question is, we no longer have a formal draft. We have an economic draft, but we don't have people being dragooned into the armed forces in massive numbers. And I wish that we hadn't fought against the draft, actually. It would be better if we did have a draft.
I agree.
But in any case, to what extent does that influence the present organizing of GIs? Because at least some of them are gung-ho about being in the military. Not all. Some of them have been drafted because of economics, and they understand that. But to what extent does the fact that there is no draft and that wars are done by proxy armies, and the US doesn't send troops to Ukraine, it just has a proxy army there. To what extent does that influence the way in which you're organizing now, or the movement is organizing now among veterans? Thank you.
Well, let
You
me
wanna-
jump out for a second, is that there's no doubt that there'd be more resistance in the military to any of our U.S. intervention or wars and threats of war if there were conscripted soldiers in the military. And obviously it led to the radicalization and the mobilization of many young draft age people who were to some extent the core of the anti-war movement and the anti-war demonstrations. At the same time, I think it's important to realize that a lot of the resistance that we talked about that in the military in Vietnam was done by enlisted soldiers, people who were members of the so-called poverty draft. So it wasn't just drafted soldiers who were resisting by any means. And personally, even though having a draft might cause more resistance, I can't morally agree with somewhat of a Machiavellian cynical thing to force people to put people at the risk of going to prison because they don't want to join the military. It's not something that I would call for. But at the same time, there's a contradiction there because Brian's right. There would be, and I'll let you make that case, Brian. There would be no doubt stronger awareness and resistance among young people if they were facing a conscription.
Well, yeah, and
What do you think, Brian?
it gives people the opportunity to form a movement resisting the draft. In other words, just the fact that they would have a draft is a provocative policy decision that gives the movement people, or potentially more movement people, a reason to resist even more vociferously.
Right.
I was never in
Well,
favor.
there is draft registration.
Now
There
there is.
is millions of young men have failed to register
Yeah,
for the draft.
They're not going to either.
Yeah. Anyway,
Right.
interesting
And
topic.
they know, the government knows not to do it, not to have the draft, because they know it's going to lead to incredible resistance in the streets. They
Right.
can't do that.
That's one of the lessons that they learned.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to go to Richard Wright. Please go ahead, Richard, after unmuting yourself.
Yeah, thank you. This brings back a lot of memories. Boy, oh boy, does it bring back a lot of memories. Yeah, first off, I was on, I was drafted. My number came, I was in the first lottery. I still remember sitting in the my college dorm and watching my number come up, which was 32 or 33, something like that. I ended up going into the Navy, and where I I can I got in a lot of trouble. Let's put it that way. I worked on something, a paper called an anti-war thing called the Grapes of Wrath. I was down in Norfolk. I had, I don't know, any number of personal tete-a-tetes with the captain, captain's mass. Ultimately ended up being hunted down on board ship up in Halifax for a fragging. Actually, they're after my ass with a piece of bar stock. I got out of that one okay. Anyways, so I've got to say I would just also I went down to Nicaragua. I was with Technica about a month or two after Ronald Reagan was reelected. I found out that later on that I had a nephew who was in Special Forces, and that he died on the other side of the border in wounds consistent with a grenade or a landmine. And I was up at the technical agricultural farm up on the border, and that did a lot of eye-opening, much more so than being in Managua, to be honest with you. In any case, let me, I'm with Sharon, I think, on this. I'm on the side of a draft. Although I do not think that it really leads to, organizing. I mean, I see a lot of, I was there and I saw a lot of people who got drafted, who went in, got a lot of technical experience, came from, I came from I grew up in Maine. My old man was a doctor. I came from a relatively privileged situation. These guys were like basically blue collar. They were in there, in spite of, they were getting technical skills, and
Time to wrap up a bit.
okay, I'll just leave it there. I'll just comments. Thank you. That nice presentation, by the way.
Thank you. Then now we're going to go to Janet. Please go ahead, Janet.
Yes, thank you, Mehmet. Hi, Brian. I want to salute you for your courage in literally putting your body and life on the line so many times in the name of resistance. I went up to the Concord Naval Weapons Station a couple of times to support you and the others who were blocking the tracks there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you would care to compare the Viet Cong resistance movement in South Vietnam to Hamas and other resistance forces inside Gaza when it comes to armed struggle, and specifically regarding the use of underground tunnels. And also if you talk about the distinction between a war and a liberation movement, mainly when it comes to the use of armed force versus non-violent resistance. And this is not the kind of non-violent resistance that would be from outside the struggle. I'm talking about internally. And also, if I may, I'd like to ask Gerry something. The last time you were a guest on one of these forums, you were talking about an upcoming voyage of the Golden Rule, and I asked you if you would fly a Palestinian flag on the boat. You said you'd look into it, and I was wondering if you would let us know whether, have you flown a Palestinian flag on the Golden Rule? Thank you.
So Janet, you managed to squeeze in 3 or 4 questions there. But I'll just get the last one out of the way. The Golden Rule has not yet found the right moment to fly a Palestinian flag. However, we appreciated the suggestion a lot. We have discussed it. The Golden Rule is coming into San Francisco Bay for the month of August. And we're going to be doing a lot of intersectional organizing, taking Palestinian activists out sailing with us, and certainly at that time, we'll have a Palestinian flag on board.
Thank you.
Now,
and Janet, you could help us do some of that organizing, by the way. We'll be in touch with you.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go to Philippa. Yeah.
Brian.
There were a couple of questions.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Well,
sorry for cutting you.
The question was comparing the Viet Cong with the Hamas. Was that the question?
Yes.
Well, they're both liberation armies, and they both used underground tunnels, and the Yankees, us Yankees, had no idea in Vietnam where the hell these people were. Even sometimes they were right under our feet, by 15 feet under us. And I think, when the incident happened in Palestine on October 7th, was it October 8th? I immediately, I've been to Palestine 3 times. And I said, wow. And I hadn't studied much about the Hamas movement until then, but I said, now I've got to have some literature supporting the Hamas liberation army after 75 years of occupation under international law. They're perfectly in their right to resist the occupation, even violently. And the same was true with the Viet Cong. But of course, I got inspiration from the Viet Cong and Hamas. Even now, and my Gaza has almost sometimes got me so depressed that I had to regroup myself. When I have a therapist here in Nicaragua, a bilingual therapist, Nicaraguan, and I had to be careful how far I went with my emotional temperament, which would say, I want this to stop, and it's not stopping. So I had to gauge my emotions with my intellect and say, I can't get myself destroyed with depression. So I have to gauge myself and allow my emotions to be very angry, and yet I don't want to get depressed. So I've had to work on distinguishing emotional attachment from emotional yearning. I mean, a yearning of wanting Hamas and the world to be victorious over the Israelis, but there's nobody coming to their help except the Houthis. Certainly not the U.S. and none of the Middle East countries either. Of course, Iran is supporting resistance, but I think that's one of the most significant things that we have to deal with is the human society's moral compass being really severely compromised by not supporting the Palestinians. I think it's very deep. I think this idea of not intervening in a case like this it certainly hurts me, and I think it hurts a lot of people. It's like we can't just watch and cry. We have to do more than that, and I'm not sure how to do that, but it certainly has affected me. And I when I went back to Vietnam in 2016, I met with ex members of the Viet Cong, really the National Liberation Front, and I apologized to them for my role in Vietnam. And I also went to Hanoi, and I met with several hundred former North Vietnamese soldiers and told them the same thing. I'm very sorry that if I knew then what I know now, I would have been fighting with you, not with the U.S.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we are going to Philippa, please. Could you unmute yourself? Great, thank you.
Yeah, hi. Just want to say thank you so much, Brian. I lived in San Francisco in the 1980s. You were my hero at the time, and it's a great honor to be on this Zoom with you. I just want to, I don't have a question, I have some comments. I was very active with the Veteran Speakers Alliance in San Francisco, which was organized by Eduardo Cohen. So I do want to mention a couple of the things that we did at that point. So one of the things we did was we organized a picket outside the film Rambo, which actually got a lot of publicity, where we would, because Rambo was this, was a way of conditioning people psychologically to fight indigenous people. And the other thing that we did is in the Veteran Speakers Alliance, I'm not a veteran myself, I was helping out, was to organize a picket, a group of veterans to go down to the Western White House, which is where President Reagan was summering, and organize the demonstration there. And then the other thing that Edward Cohen initiated was to organize veterans to go to the White House and to throw their congressional medals over the gates of the White House, and that I think Charles Littke was in on that action. So that's all I just wanted to bring those actions up, and it's a great honor again to be on this Zoom with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we go to Rai. Rai, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, Brian and Gerry, thank you very much. And I'm greatly struck by Brian's courage and his conviction of his humanity. And that made me think. I mean, I was 1A, about to be sent to Vietnam in 1970, and the draft lottery saved me from having to go. But I was participating in Chicago area against the war since '68. Democratic Convention has got me into it. I was an immigrant for 2 years at that point. I wasn't actually on a student visa, which you can't do today. Today, if you're getting involved in that, they will throw you out of the country. Anyway, the question I have for both of you, I faced racism comments and so forth. I'm not attacks, but in my participation. But I think, to me, racism is a class-based thing. And I always found, even if superficially working class people are racist, their humanity asserts finally. This is what I've seen, Brian. And I would like you to comment on that, because if we fight against to overthrow capitalism, most of the workers are white. And I mean, majority workers in America even today are white. So this is an important issue. You're a Marxist, Brian, and Gerry, both of you, please comment on this. Am I mistaken on that? Thank you.
Well, you know,
Sorry, my video was off. Sorry, I didn't mean to. That was accidentally off. Yeah, okay. You can see
the
me.
class struggle, of course, revolves around race as well as even sex, but or gender. But there's when Black people become middle and upper class, they then often turn against their own fellow Black citizens who are still in a lower level of economics. So that shows you that class is more important than race. But I love the workers world. That was their name of the labor group that was wiped out after the 1920s. Workers world.
Workers of the world.
Workers of the world.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they were opposed to wage slavery. They were really socialist because, you know, they wanted to get rid of the employee-employer distinction. And there's still some workers, how do you say it? Workers of the world?
Workers of the world.
Workers of the world. They have chapters around the United States even now.
IWW.
What's that?
IWW.
International Workers of the World.
Oh yeah,
right.
yeah, IWW. So I after I realized I wasn't going to be a lawyer, and joined the fast our Veterans Fast in 1986, I was 45 years old. And I thought, I'm not going to work for the man. No way. And our fast was open-ended. So I thought we were all going to die at different times. We had a doctor that was monitoring us. And when we stopped the fast in October 17, 1987, I didn't know what I was going to do, because I thought my ashes were going to be strewn in Esteli, and I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. I wasn't going to work for the man. But what happened during the fast for me is I lost my fear of death. So it really is amazing to no longer worry about dying. It's okay whenever it happens. Now I lost my train of thought. What was that? Where was I going with this?
Class-based racism is my question.
The what?
Class and race.
Yeah,
Race.
class and race. So I think that I just think that I don't know how to open up these movements so that they're welcoming everybody. Most of my best friends in the military were Black, and they were Black officers. And when I got out of the military, most of my friends were white. But I felt, and also I grew up with the Amish and the Seneca Indians. So I had two minority groups that I related to growing up, but they weren't Black, but they were ostracized. So Gerry, do you have some insights on this? I mean,
You know, I don't have anything to address that right now. That's a deep and complex question. I'm not the most qualified, but I did want to interject for a second because I wanted to acknowledge that a very good friend of Brian's and mine, Al Gakowski, is on the call on the Zoom right now. And if you don't know, Al has actually been talking and writing about and being interviewed about his own very dramatic act of resistance during the Vietnam War, where as a merchant marine, he participated in hijacking a ship that was carrying napalm to be dropped on Vietnamese people, and for which he paid a large price and spent better part of 10 years in prison in the United States. And Al's still going strong as a frontline fighter in Veterans for Peace. So Al, if you want to share a few words with us, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. And Al was also with us in Nicaragua a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you, Gerry. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I came in late on this call. I wanted to be on it from the very beginning. So I've requested a copy of it, and I see somebody's already responded, and I appreciate that. But Gerry's and this question about race and class, it sends flashes in my brain going off, because I live in Virginia, which is the very bed of the Civil War, and I actually live only a few minutes from Harper's Ferry. And I was at John Brown Days last year or the year before in Harper's Ferry with a historian and going on a walking tour with them. And I learned something that I had not learned ever before about slavery in the United States, that Virginia had passed a law that if you were white and wanted to vote, you had to own a slave. And I had never known that. And so when you look at the class system regarding slavery and racism, it's very much entrenched in that. But when the state makes a law that says that if you're going to vote, you have to own a slave, then not all of those poor whites could afford them. And so it really is a class issue. And additionally, I believe that when working class people realize it, that we do everything in our lives to break that barrier of racism. And I just wanted to say that that's my opinion on that. And that's all I got to say. And Gerry, thank you for the shout out. And Brian, my brother, it's good to see you. And thank you for the gift.
Thank you for the gift.
Thanks for being here, Al.
It's good to see you guys. I'll be quiet.
Great.
You don't have to be quiet. You can jump in.
Please do.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. That was great. So now we're going to go to Lucy, and then I'm going to call myself, and then I have three other people waiting. Thank you. Go ahead, Lucy.
I wanted to say thank you so much for the conversation that we were just having, and because of the presentation that you gave was so illuminating, and it made me come out of my incognito mode. But anyway, the question is not really a question. I just wanted to add a little bit more to the conversation about how do we raise the consciousness of the people in this country? Because we do live inside of a big monster, and it has created a culture of individualism, a what I call dog-eat-dog world. And it says you can only become successful if you're a dog and you kill your adversary. So the zero-sum game that we have promoted in this country has, I think, influenced the way we look at things. And I think it has hurt the working class a lot. Not only that, but the working class has been distorted completely because the U.S. eliminated a lot of the industrial workers that we used to have. So now we have workers, but they are working in different little locations, separated one from the other, and it's becomes more difficult to organize them and to talk to them and to reach them. And that on top of the fact that we live inside of a monster that eats other little nations and sucks the wealth and concentrates it in a very few hands. So those are difficulties, but I think it's good to look at them and see how we can break them down or start fighting against them. That's just a comment. I don't know if you want to respond to that, but that's that's the thing that occupies my time sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that the culture as a whole, and we can say a lot of people are suffering in the culture, but I think the culture as a whole needs to feel a lot more pain, even a war, heaven forbid, because we have not still dealt with the fact that we killed the 18 million savages. We called them savages.
Right.
We have not dealt with that yet.
Yes.
We have not developed a maturity and a perspective on life that would have come from dealing with shame instead of just being in denial about it. And I think the culture needs a shot of pain, a cultural shot of pain. A lot of people in pain, but there's still this notion that the United States is maybe better than others.
Right.
And it isn't better, but it still feels a little bit separate from the rest of the world. And I think that would have not happened if we had to deal with our origins of the Holocaust. We would have matured that we cannot get away with doing these kinds of things without huge consequences.
Yeah.
And
just being aware that kids in school are taught, right?
Yeah.
That our country is great. Democracy works. Look how good we are. We're the abundance of this and democracy, and you vote, and all of it is fake. And people have begun to understand some of that. There is the reason why Donald Trump has become so popular with many of them is because he puts down the system. And although he has no interest in destroying the system, he is in fact moving more towards doing it than anybody else in the long run. Although he's doing it inadvertently, he doesn't realize that by
Thank you.
putting those tariffs, he's going to, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you very much. I'll go to Jim now. Jim, if you can please unmute yourself and ask your question or your comment.
Yeah, thank you. Real honor to be with you, Brian. I was actually in the Tonkin Gulf on an aircraft carrier when the Vietnam War escalated. Erroneously, Daniel Ellsberg explained to me how U.S. CIA boats were caught by the North Vietnamese, etc. And he also went to work for the Pentagon that morning, and he saw the messages that actually would have made it unlikely Haiphong Harbor would have been attacked. But McNamara withheld that. And he explained all that. It really helped a lot because of the feelings I had about it. And prior to the Tonkin Gulf, we actually docked our aircraft carrier in Yemen. And I love telling people that 60 years ago, our carrier docked in Yemen. And they either get it or they don't. But it says everything about moving away from hegemony to the multipolar world. In fact, the U.S. can't go 100 miles of Yemen right now, and with the Houthis are. And so I think it's a really good contrast. My big interest right now is, and we also went to Nicaragua. We almost took a U.S. congressman with us. Came close. He bailed at the last minute.
Who was that?
So pissed. But moral injury, you know, after the Air Force guy, I can't remember, immolated himself from the Israeli consulate. And the media wanted to portray it as mental illness. And because he had made that 2-minute video where he calmly talked about what he was doing in the spirit of the nuns and monks in Vietnam when they immolated themselves against our country, it was impossible as long as the video stayed up. And I couldn't believe it. It did stay up. And so people could see that, what his inspiration was, where he was at spiritually. And when I had an experience at the VA with a breakdown, and we were trying to talk about our moral injury, how we felt about what we did or didn't do. And the staff there was like, no politics. The VA is weak on facilitating moral injury, and yet it's the natural fourth step, so to speak, of a PTSD healing, of post-traumatic growth. And I believe that if we had like a network where people could go and not go to a chaplain to get spiritually healed that way, but to meet with other veterans and talk about how they feel about their moral injury, because Veterans for Peace is the natural place to go with moral injury. I would say almost all of us have moral injury, or we wouldn't be here. But
that's 3 minutes.
Yeah. So your comments, please.
Oh, I love hearing the story, your story and your experiences. Well, I think it's kind of a concept that's fairly new. The words moral injury, but it's not a new reality. Finding one's moral compass is really important. And I know for me, I remember in April 14th, 1969, I had an experience where I discovered an incredible reality that we were all connected, including the people that were at my feet dead from napalm. And I was throwing up, and my Vietnamese counterpart officer was laughing, and I was throwing up. And he was older than me, but he had worked with the French, and he was very much brainwashed into Western thinking. But yeah, it's true. And when I went to a vets rap group back in 1981 in Massachusetts, the first guy, I was my first time in a rap group, but the very first guy that talked was talking about how they strapped it. They had captured a North Vietnamese officer, and they spread eagled him on the ground with stakes, with his arms outreached and his legs staked. And they wanted to see if he would. They would shoot. They said we were firing rounds around his head. We wanted to see him show some fear. And he said he was very stoic through the whole thing. So this is a Vietnam veteran that said, I was so angry that he didn't show any emotion. I just unloaded my automatic weapon and took his head off, cut his neck with so many bullets. And I said to the facilitator, I said, because I hadn't been to one of these before, is this what we're supposed to be doing? I said, the guy was so proud of what he had done. And no, the counselor said, no, this was not something that he wanted to promote. But I never went back to that group because I knew that I wasn't going to feel validated. I was trying to recover from all this insanity, and it's true. And the whole society from 1607 on has been destroying other people with impunity, no feelings, that's why I say the deeper question is, can the society deal with the shame of its origins? If it can, it will change us completely. We will be radicalized.
Thank you. I see that now, that your kind of idea of the deeper discussion relates to moral injury. Thank you for helping.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Now I'd like to call myself. This is not a question, just a comment on how you guys were here fighting the war, fighting against the war. And I was a 15-year-old teenager when I first attended a socialist meeting in Turkey. And any kind of support for the Vietnamese people was illegal at that time. And we held this meeting right at the foot of the hill where there was a US military base. And I remember I was only 15, and the fascists attacked the meeting, and they broke our microphone and everything, just like what they are trying to do now here. But that led me to think about it. And in 1969, the next year, I saw quite by chance some people demonstrating in front of the US aid office. And I was there just observing, and then all the, the signs of the US aid and everything came down. And right around that time, US ambassador to Turkey, Kommer is his name, visited the university that was built with US money. A very distinguished, very, great university it was, and all its courses were taught in English. So people were going there, and Kommer just wanted to go and visit this university that was built by America. And Kommer was actually the designer of the Phoenix program in Vietnam. And after his role there, he was appointed to the Turkish embassy. And when he visited, a group of socialists kind of like demonstrated and turned his car around and burned it. At that time, there were many questions asked to these people. How can you, learn English, learn all this education from United States and still attack the U.S. Ambassador? Now, the answer that the leaders is historic. He said, all our English that we learned, we only learned 3 words: Yankee, go home. And what happened is that every one of those students that burned the car in later years were ambushed and killed. And that's the time when I decided that that was the university to go to. So again, just let me emphasize that speaking on behalf of the Vietnamese people in Turkey was illegal, but the socialists, the communists, took up the flag and they fought in, on the side of the U.S. Soldiers who were against the war and the Vietnamese people. Thank you for that. Okay. Now we're going to go to Norma.
Hi, everybody. And I made my comments at the beginning of the gathering to the presenters. You all talked about, I wrote a note on the chat that said that Hamas is the great defender of the people's uprisings throughout the world. Goulden sent me a correction. I'm going to have to do some research talking about the difference between the Vietnamese, who were communists, versus the Hamas that had a religious connection. I'll look it up. People have to be informed that amnesty is not about amnesty. It is an oppositional organization protecting the status quo, and they keep thinking otherwise. A lot of people think otherwise. Well, you mentioned that there are organizations on the left that didn't get it, and that's part of taking the problem in hand. Also, you mentioned that you became not unafraid of death. And my comment back on that one, a very informative one, is we're not afraid of death. We're afraid of getting to death. It's so difficult in a capitalist society where you have to pay for care and you might not have it or be able to get it. But if you know you're going to be taken care of, you don't have to be afraid of it. And the other thing is, what makes people this way is being raised capitalists. Lucy was talking a lot about what goes on. The capitalism is inbred, indoctrinated into people from the cradle.
Right.
The competition, the horror. And
Sure.
It's hard to get over. It's like you've heard people say, I'm a recovering Catholic, people are recovering capitalists and going towards the feeling of mutual care and all the things we've been talking about here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Pete Schoonmaker.
Hi, y'all. Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Gerry, for all the good work and everybody y'all putting into this. The 30th was a really, really important anniversary. And I'm thinking there's another anniversary coming up, which we probably already know about from the news. July 14th is the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, and Trump's wanting to do this big shindig in D.C. or whatever. And I'm thinking like every veteran group in the country, especially every anti-war, anti-imperialist group, needs to really come out and like oppose that shit. So what I was thinking.
I think that's in June, Pete. June 14th.
June? Okay, June. Okay, June. We're trying to stand correct. Whichever day it is, that really, I was thinking we can all come together and address this whole what this war machine and what this like fascist connection into that is doing.
Yeah. It's Trump's birthday. He wants it to be a birthday celebration for himself. But yeah, I know that Pete. I know a lot of people in Veterans for Peace are talking about this, and I think, and I see the Vote Vets also has got a big initiative around that. So I think it'll be a convergence of different veterans groups and others that'll show up and make their voices heard at that parade, or maybe even try to stop the parade.
Cool.
It'd be great to confiscate one of the tanks that'll be in the parade.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And now we're going to Judith. Please unmute yourself. Judith? Okay, there you go, Judith. You are muted again. Let me go.
I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted. Okay. All right. So, Brian, you're a Facebook friend of mine. So, okay. I wanted to say, there are so many veterans in this country that are homeless and drug addicted and so on, and I'm sure that the capitalist administration wants them that way because that stymies their revolutionary potential to have this huge group of men that are capable of fighting and to make them impotent that way. So I wonder if there's any way that you can or anyway what your veterans groups are doing to reach out to these people and kind of enlighten them, get them on your side.
Well, I know there's a lot of homeless people. Some of them are veterans and some are not, but the society is so sick at the base. It doesn't have a moral compass. It doesn't have anything really to believe in other than be a predator or a prey. And that's why I go back to thinking that our society, our Western European colonial society, has never ever dealt with what they've done to the Indians and to the blacks. It was all done with impunity because of a feeling of superiority. That feeling of superiority is what is going to destroy us today.
Well, that may be, but if you bring up this topic to somebody that's inculcated in white supremacy, they're just going to be against you.
Right.
The veterans that are drug addicted, etc., they need a human contact. They need the contact of somebody that is not a predator and that is interested in helping them.
Well, I agree. When I was a director of a Veterans Outreach Center in Greenfield, Massachusetts in 1983, 84, and 85, there were many of the people I dealt with were homeless. They had an encampment under a bridge. I took them food and sleeping bags and so forth, but they were rightfully not wanting to be part of any system support for them because they had said that the system completely screw up their life. And it's true. The system is so class and race oriented. And if you have any sensitivity at all or a moral compass, if you don't have an alternative, you're going to try to drop out. And you drop out with alcohol or drugs. And I think that I'm not in the US now. I haven't been in the US for 8 years. But it's a huge problem, but I think it's a symptom of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Okay, thank you. The last question is going to be Eugene. Go ahead, Gene.
Okay, well, thanks, Brian and Gerry. This was a great talk, and I really want to thank my comrades on the planning committee to put this together. It's really wonderful. And, I joined the Marines in 1957, which was after Korea, before Vietnam. And so I tell people, even though I may be an atheist, but I still thank God that she never sent me into combat, because I see what happens to people, what has happened to people that are doing this. So I really appreciate all of this. I appreciate those people here that are members of Veterans for Peace, and encourage you to join VFP because we're dedicated to the abolishment of war. And that is a noble cause, and I hope you'll join with us. And again, thanks the speakers today. This was just a great talk and really took a giant step forward in raising people's consciousness. It did mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you
Gene,
all.
and for all the work that you do. I wanted to say, Mehmet, if I could just interject quickly,
Sure.
just a few words about the situation that active duty military, National Guard, and reserves are facing today. Not only are they being asked to facilitate the shipment of weapons to Israel and to participate in the bombing of Yemen, very possibly going to war against Iran in the near future, but they're also being asked to participate and facilitate mass deportation in the United States, and possibly even to be used against anti-war and anti-genocide protests. So this is a very important moment to be reaching out to the soldiers, to the active duty GIs, National Guard, and reservists. Veterans for Peace is in discussion with a number of the counseling organizations that help people get out of the military or to know their rights while they're in the military. And we're also going to be establishing a presence at the border to reach out to the GIs who have been sent to the border to facilitate repression against immigrant communities. Also, I just want to mention quickly, as I did before, that Veterans for Peace anti-nuclear sailboat, the Golden Rule, is going to be in the San Francisco Bay. I know many of you are in the San Francisco Bay area for the entire month of August and perhaps into September a ways. And we're going to be hooking up with as many of different groups and issues as possible. We want to take the immigrants out sailing with us. We want to take the Palestine protesters out with us. We want to be reaching out to alternative media. We'd love to take a group from the Marxist Forum out sailing with us one day. Feel free to get in touch with me, Gerry Condon at veteransforpeace.org, if you're interested in more information about that and what Veterans for Peace is up to. And the other
Thank you very much.
The other thing you know about Veterans for Peace, 20% of our members almost are not veterans. So if you're really interested in lifting up the work of veterans, there's a place for associate members who are not veterans and actually playing more and more prominent roles within Veterans for Peace. So you're welcome.
Thank you very much. We've kind of overwent the time allocated for this session. So I apologize for those waiting for to ask questions, but it's past our time. So I thank you both Brian and Gerry for coming to this forum all the way from Nicaragua and here. So many thanks to you guys. We are following your lead in this struggle. And so we'll see. Next week, we are going to have Baman Azad. So please join us. And again, thank you everybody for participating, questions, and our speakers for making this forum a very interesting and very informative for the next generations to come. Thank you, everybody. So see you all next week.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat, at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, at yahoo.com, and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.